Yeah.
He owned
Yeah.
it.
I also super loved his "Don't Let the Sun Go Down on
Oh
Me."
Oh,
The one he
yes,
performed
the
with
one
Elton
with
with
John.
Elton
Elton
John.
John.
Yes, even
That's on my playlist always.
mm,
That
That
song.
was a
even
big
nale
one.
yakhe no Mary J. As love
As
Yeah,
that one,
yeah, yeah.
love
yeah,
that one,
Uh,
love that one.
yeah, guys. Guys, we're just talking about George
George
Michael, but
Michael.
now we are
Yes.
going to go into a subject that I'm
Mm,
sure a lot of you guys have been waiting for. A subject that speaks to some of the problems that people could be going through now. We just want to enlighten you a little bit. Of course, our resident actor is here in the studio to talk to us about this particular subject. But before we go to the Master of the High Court, also another important thing that happened
mm,
this week that we want to speak to guys is the subject, the
Directly.
Dire Tladi, who was
mm.
appointed into the International Court of Justice,
Yes.
which actor happens to know this guy.
Oh wow,
So yeah.
Hector knows him important people.
So yeah,
Well, we are kind of contemporaries.
yeah.
All
Oh,
right,
okay, okay.
okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So when ukhethe ushiyeka apha eprovinsini, and that's
Yes.
why. But yeah, I think, I mean, what an honor, and of course, I mean, he's the first judge to be elected there in
Yeah.
that
Yes.
position,
It is
South African
it is
judge.
incredible, but he's a solid international lawyer.
Yeah, yeah,
And well, I got to know him but just over 20 years ago when I was doing environmental law
yeah.
masters.
Mm,
An aspect which is international environmental law,
okay.
Mm-hmm.
and he's an international law guy.
All
Yeah.
right.
Okay. And he had just done his doctorate in international law from the Netherlands, I think.
Okay.
And since then, he's really stuck into it. Initially, I think I thought he was more of an international trade law guy.
Mm,
Yeah,
But then
yeah.
I've seen that since then, he went into quite a bit of
mm,
areas of international law,
mm,
And when I say he's a solid scholar, I see that he is now a B1 rated researcher.
Wow.
There's this National Research Foundation rating.
Yes.
Starts with Y, which is for young emerging researchers. Then
Mm.
you've got P. Then you've got C, C-rated researchers, C1, C2, C3. Then you've
Mm.
got B1, B2, and then you've got A-rated researchers.
Yes.
So he is B1.
Mm.
Oh,
Just
okay.
just to
Wow.
put it in context, Jonathan Janssen only got A1 rated last year or the year
Come
before.
on.
Are you
Jonathan
serious?
Jansen.
So it's not so easy to get.
Yeah, yeah.
There are very few
Jeez.
A-rated. So when you say B1 basically means internationally acclaimed
Yeah.
researcher
Oh,
in that
wow.
area.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he does have international stature,
Mm.
and Tladi as well has been on the United Nations Commission on International Law Commission
Mm.
since 2010 or something like
Wow.
that.
Mm.
Wow.
So he
So
has
he's not new in that
he has
space.
earned his stripes, yes. And in fact, currently he was a special rapporteur on this project. I'm going to say a Latin word now. Something in international law is something called jus cogens.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jus cogens refers to norms that are recognized in international law as being binding and you cannot derogate from.
Yeah.
So, and there's always debate about, has a norm gotten to that level where countries, even though they're sovereign, they cannot derogate from it.
Okay.
They've become so binding that even if you're not party to the treaty where it is contained,
Yeah.
they're still bound by it.
Okay.
You know, that sort of thing. So it's been doing very important work,
Jeez.
even on the law of the sea and
Mm.
that sort of thing. Because the International Court of Justice, unlike the International Criminal Court,
Yeah.
is a civil court.
Okay.
So it deals with all these issues of sometimes there are transboundary disputes between countries. I remember some years ago in my work in environmental law, an issue of a potential dispute between Egypt and countries on the upper side of the Nile
Yeah.
River.
All right.
Yeah.
Because the Nile River
Yeah,
is
of
so
course.
important to the life of Egypt.
Yes.
One of the things that Egypt was saying was, look, if any of you build a dam or anything on the Nile River, which then has the effect of reducing the amount of water
Water,
that
yeah.
that comes to
flows,
us,
Yes.
we will take that as an act of hostility
Wow.
and we could go to war. So you've got all that sort of thing happening. It's not a criminal court, so there's no prosecutor,
Yeah.
but countries can submit themselves for adjudication of disputes.
All right.
So it's a 9-year term.
Yeah, it's a 9-year
Jeez,
term.
9-year
yeah, it's quite
term.
long.
They make sure that there are 15 judges at the
Yeah.
ICJ.
Yeah.
And so they kind of appointed in tranches of 5 for continuity.
Okay.
So he
Alright.
was part of the latest 5.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think one is from Australia, the other one is from the US, he's from South Africa, there's another one from Romania,
Mm.
and some. It's quite a diverse court.
Wow.
Mm.
And also, I mean, I think your knowledge of at that level of international law must be impeccable to
It
actually
is.
to be in that space.
That's why I'm saying I think he really has earned his stripes. When you look at
Mm.
his profile, it wasn't. In any case, it's not easy because you are voted for by the United Nations General Assembly
Yeah.
as well
Yes.
as the Security Council,
Wow.
and you must get the majority votes in both
Mm.
forums for you
Jeez.
to.
So
to
you don't
appointed.
just nje uvuke and you don't campaign for this thing.
You don't.
oh,
Okay, you do have to have the support of your country. So I
Yeah.
think he was
course.
nominated
Oh,
through
okay.
cabinet support
Mm.
sometime back in March.
Yeah.
All
And
right.
this process has been going on.
Yeah, I mean,
it goes to
obviously in your
Secretary
country
General.
there's a different aspect, but in terms of the United Nations itself, you don't go out there say, "It's Pogi, vote for me," and all of that. So your work
campaign
has to, yeah,
has
your work
to
has
speak
to
for
speak
itself.
Yeah.
Mm.
This is why I mentioned his rating.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Once you get that rating, it means you are internationally acclaimed,
Yes.
acknowledged. You are known.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, for the longest time in South Africa, I think the one distinct authority in international law was a chap called John Dugard,
Mm.
All right.
who's almost 90 now, because was born in 1936.
Jeez.
Wow.
So Udire kind of almost is one of those people who will be emerging as like a new John Dugard.
Yeah.
as it
All
were.
right. Mm.
And how old is he?
It should be probably 51, 52.
Oh, it's
Oh, okay,
still.
okay.
That's why I said we are
yeah,
contemporaries.
Yeah.
So-
Yes.
Because I think
He's
some
not
of the
that old.
problems
Yeah.
sometimes, I mean, with the academics, say, but they look old. These
They
people,
do.
and,
West Judiciary.
yeah, and also, I mean,
Mm.
that's the kind of thing that maybe some of the new guys that are coming up need to, because it looks like for you to get to these positions you have to quite old, maybe earn your stripes, as you were saying.
Yeah.
It takes quite a lot.
Mm.
But you do have now increasingly, I mean, it used to be that you didn't have any people who are below the age of 30 who don't have doctorates.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But now you've got 24-year-olds who have got doctorates already.
Mm.
So
Times are
people get there
changing.
much more
Mm.
quickly.
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
Wow.
Uh,
I mean,
Jeez.
so the what does this mean for the country in terms of having this type of a nomination? Does it say anything about us as a country in terms of now him representing us in that space?
look, it does say we because he's a professor at the University of Pretoria, so it does say something meaningful about the confidence that the world has in what is produced in this country, scholarly and intellectually, and so on. But one of the important things, of course, about being a judge is that you're not there to represent your country.
Yeah,
Yes.
sure.
You also have to
You're a
sort of
contributor.
divest
Mm.
that
Yeah,
thing
yeah,
into-
yeah.
Mm.
the sort of impartiality.
Wow.
And this has been happening increasingly. It did remind me of our chancellor at Fort here,
Mm.
Dumisan Sebeza,
Mm.
SC,
Yeah.
is a judge
Yes.
of the African court.
Mm.
So that's sort of the African version
Mm.
of the,
Oh, yeah,
the-
yeah.
Yes.
of the international court. So it is good. It is also good to see black
Yeah, sure.
Mm.
scholars and academics getting into these spaces as well.
Yes.
You know, so it's a
I think for us, I
good
mean,
progress.
also really to move away from some of the negatives we
Yeah.
face
As a
sometimes.
country, yeah.
So these are that's what would fall into the category of
Mm.
good news, as it were. You know, we've
Mm.
just from the Springboks and to
Yes.
this now, and of course this week the cricket. Everyone is hoping that we move
At
over
least-
there. Yeah.
Okay, at
The
what stage are we?
semifinals,
Are we in
this
now?
is the semifinals we're
Semifinals,
playing.
yeah.
All right.
So once we go through the semifinals, it means we actually going to be in the finals for I think for the very first time
Yeah, but it's always been the semis. Eh?
Yeah, it's always been the
We're always
semis,
dropping
and
out
that's
the
why we're
semis.
called
Yes.
chokers. So we hope we
It's
don't
like we
choke.
choke when
Yeah.
the chips are down.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The pressure's
So
too
I
much.
mean, yeah, that subject I think
Mm.
was very important for us to touch,
Yes.
Spoky, because it really encourages those who are. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you, and I was interested,
Fantastic.
yeah, in your students. I mean, I'm sure the guys who are doing law, for them, you
Mm.
know, these are some of the things that they may have been speaking about this week. Even though there are no lectures continuing, but I'm sure
Yeah.
there'd been
Because they're writing
Yeah.
exams now.
yeah,
so-
yeah. I'm sure there've been a lot of debates around that particular subject. Guys, the time is 4:13. Yes. I want us to go now to the
Yes.
subject of the
Mhm.
Master of the High Court, which is an important subject that we had also wanted to put here before you guys. Brandam Kwe, hi. Good to see you there. So, of Master of the High Court, Hector, this
Mhm.
is.
Yeah.
Let me hand over to you to start
Yes.
this one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe let me give a bold sketch of what is this that we're talking
Yeah,
about.
sure.
Yes.
Okay. So the Master of the High Court is designed to provide services, obviously in the High Court,
Mm.
related to a number of things. The administration of deceased estates, which is probably what we're going to talk
Mhm.
about the most. But in the broad sense, what the Master of High Court is there for is to make sure that matters relating to people who cannot act in their own capacity
Mhm.
are handled expeditiously
Mhm.
and fairly. So, for example, you've got matters relating to trusts, issues relating to funds for minors and people who lack mental capacity, people who are insolvent, who are under curatorship, people who lack mental capacity are under what is called tutorship. And then there's the master's office also manages what is called the guardians fund.
Okay.
And in this fund, there's all sorts of monies for all sorts of different people,
Yeah.
including what I've just mentioned, the people who lack capacity, mental capacity, and so
Mm.
on. But also for heirs who appear in wills but are not have not been located.
Mm.
So the
Okay.
money stays in the
Stays
this
in the,
fund.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
In this fund, missing persons
Mm.
whose estates also would
Mm.
stay in this fund. This person is missing but has not been declared dead.
Yeah.
My
So the money
goodness.
also is, so it's hundreds of millions actually
Yeah.
of rands that are in
Okay.
this fund. But most people's interaction with the office of the master is when
Mm.
somebody dies and you want an executor to be appointed,
Mm.
whether you've died with a will or without a will,
Mm.
you know, because letters of executorship are issued by the office of the master.
Mm.
Since it's high court based, you basically have one in each province, but
Mm.
sometimes you've got two.
Yeah.
So, for example, here you've
Mm.
got one in Makanda and another one
Yes.
in Mthatha.
Yes.
And
Mm.
not in Bishop,
Tata,
no,
I
in
think.
Tata. Okay.
Mm.
And then you've got one in Maritzburg and all these other places and
Mm.
so on. So that's generally what it is. And there's a hierarchy there. There's a chief master, then you've got the masters. It's a fairly senior position. Most of them have got LLBs and they've got some experience, you know, as legal practitioners and so on.
I think
So-
also there was something, isn't there something about trust also being
trusts.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
he
mentioned
mentioned
it.
Oh, did
yeah,
you
yeah,
mention?
so he
Oh,
did.
okay.
Yeah. Because again, it's for the benefits of
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
you
yeah.
know the
So
beneficiaries
not
of the
is
trust.
the abuse on our Mac, these lawyers.
Well, I mean, every attorney has to have a trust account
Yeah,
for
yeah.
the benefit of
Yes.
the client,
Of
so
course,
that you
yeah.
separate your business money from that of the
Yes.
client
Otherwise.
while the case is going on. So that's why it's also called a
Mm.
trust account.
Mm.
Yeah. So there's no doubt that this is a very
Mm.
important service.
Mm.
Particularly considering the kind of beneficiaries of the
Mm.
services, you know, heirs of the deceased, you know, minors
Mm.
who don't have capacity to act of their own account, mentally incapacitated people, and all these different people. So
Mm.
obviously, yeah. So
Sorry, Hector, I just want to ask. You mentioned, you know, people that have gone missing but are not declared dead. let's say someone like in 1980 and they still haven't been declared dead, surely.
And there is
Like, at what
there is
point-
a process. There is a process which
Yeah.
I'm too rusty now.
Okay.
I last did it like in 1995.
Yes.
Like
Sorry.
when is a
Sorry.
person presumed dead? You know,
Mm,
but there is a
mm.
process
Okay. All right.
for that
Mm.
to be done officially, so
All
that
right.
so that in fact their estate can then be dealt with like
Mm.
as if they're actually dead.
All right.
Yeah, there is a process.
So, I mean, I don't want us to. We'll go to the parts where we know that there's a lot of corruption around this particular. I mean, there's monies here involved. But take us through the sort of the process where now all the administration process that is supposed to be taken by this particular court as far as deceased estates. And I know sometimes there's advertisements on papers
Yes.
that people
Mm.
of so and so, and when do those stages go about? Just take us
Look,
through.
there's the problem here is that it's very hard to say all of it from the top of my head, but
Yeah.
I'll just try to highlight some of the elements.
Yeah.
In fact, by the way, maybe we'll talk about the corruption later on. But one of the challenges that is really there is one that besets all offices basically, that of digitization,
Yeah.
Mm.
that of an old-fashioned filing system
Mm.
that has now become a dog's breakfast. You can't find anything.
Mm.
And that's probably in itself just a big headache on its own.
Mm.
The other thing is that all of these structures were created at a time when the population wasn't as big as it is now.
Yeah.
You
Mm.
know, we were talking about the census the other day.
Yeah. Sure.
Mm.
Since the first census, post-apartheid census in 1996 up to now, we've got 20 million more people. In the country,
Yeah.
you know? That's like another country.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So the capacities of all these places, you know, are just sort of overwhelmed.
Mm.
But I guess, okay, fine. To get back to your question, when a person dies, a number of things come into play. Number one of the things which is required by law, anyone who's got a document that they think is a testamentary document, they've got a duty to submit it to the office of the master.
Yeah.
You know, this might not be just be pure wills, because some of the issues that affect what happens when a person dies, you've got to do with marriage, for example, like antenuptial contracts and things like that. You know, which reminds me, by the way, that people sometimes conflate issues. So the master is not a judge.
Yeah.
In fact, you can take decisions of the master and challenge them before the court on judicial review.
Yeah.
So it's an administrative process rather than
Okay.
a judicial process.
Mm.
The office
Yeah.
that's what is carried out by the office of the master. So one of the things people can just note is that if you are not happy
with what?
you can take that on judicial review. You can
Okay.
you can get a court to give an order. You know. So one of the things that's happening now is that
However, okay, that part is important. So that administrative part, once passed, if you're not going to challenge it, you have to abide by it.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think that's very
because
important.
the
Yeah.
master gives direction.
Yeah.
So if you,
Yeah.
if you disagree with the directive of the master, you have to challenge it in
Okay.
court.
Mm.
Okay, just like the register of companies
Yeah,
and
yeah.
all these other
Mm,
people.
mm.
And then when it comes to people who are deceased, then there's a number of documents that you need to put there, because one of the things you need, which is specific, which is I think what bothers people the most, is getting a letter of executorship.
Yes.
Which then authorizes the executor to gather the assets of the deceased and deal with them according to the will or according to the rules of intestate succession, depending on whether the person died with or without a will. And one of the largest outcries has been about that instead of something that takes a matter of weeks, it's now taking months and sometimes years.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in the
yeah.
meantime, the assets are frozen and they can't be dealt with because
Yeah.
the letter is just not being
Mm.
issued. But you need a number of documents in place. Some of them are obvious, you know, the death certificate,
Yeah.
obviously. The person was married. You need the original certified copy of the marriage.
The marriage. Yeah.
Sometimes you need a decree of divorce. depending on the circumstances.
It's a whole lot of forms.
If there's a will, the will
Mm.
has to be the original will.
Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes the will is several documents
Mm.
Mm.
because
Yeah.
yeah.
Which determines along the way.
Ngo-2021 what? Watshintsha
Uh,
ngo-2022.
but also your
Yeah.
assets change.
Of
Yeah,
course,
yeah.
yeah.
So
Either
if you,
accumulation
so if you want
or-
to make sure you die testate, you
Yes.
have to update your will all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'll have some of your assets that are not covered in the will, and it
Mm.
becomes a problem. Which is why people also need advice on how to frame things in their will.
Yeah.
So sometimes people, to make sure that everything's covered, they use fractions or quarters of
Yeah.
their estate, whatever
Mm.
it will be. at that
Yeah,
point.
Yeah.
Unless there are very specific things you want to mention,
Mm.
like a house
Ba-
or
ubani
something.
usiphoki apha kule ndlu yam usiphoki ndifuna athathe laa ncwadi kulaa kona. And that's it.
Funa laa Bentley.
Yeah.
And then in the process, at some point, the person has to do like an inventory
Mm.
of the things.
Yes.
Why I'm mentioning all of these things is that sometimes it's not just the
Mm.
fault of the office of the master.
Mm.
People sometimes take long to be able to produce all these things that are required
Mm.
for the work to actually go
continue.
ahead.
Mm.
And incidentally, making an inventory of assets is not easy. Eh?
Mm.
Think about what happens even when you just move your own house.
Yeah.
You'll be
Yes.
surprised at the whole things.
Mm.
So the
Mm.
accumulations of a lifetime, and then
Mm.
you've got debtors and creditors,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
all these things coming in. But the whole idea of the office of the master is to try and have an orderly dealing of or dealing with the estate of a deceased person,
Mm.
because what is known and what is clear is that death is disruptive.
Yeah,
Mm.
sure.
So you need a fairly robust system that allows. So there are different types of forms that
Mm.
unfortunately I don't practice in this area. You know,
Yeah.
that are issued by the master, that you have to fill in a J what form for this.
There's
and that.
about, I'll tell you, there's about six forms in total, if
Yeah.
I'm not mistaken, but they're not less than 5.
Yeah, something like that. So
Monotonous and long.
it is. Yeah.
So I think the
And then the
yeah.
other thing is that
Mm.
if the estate is less than, I think, 125,000, the last time I checked, it doesn't need to go the route of the master.
okay.
You can go to a
Yes.
magistrate's court and they'll
Yes.
help you
Yes.
dispense with that. So it's only larger estates.
Mm.
Okay.
250,000.
Yeah,
or more,
and
something-
up, then you
something
go
like
to Makanda.
that. Yeah,
Mm.
then you need the office of the master.
Sister, no
I'm
experience.
saying this. I'm saying this.
Dilemanieka, cause
By the way, I'm
yeah,
saying
la
this. I'm
process.
saying
Yeah.
this
Mm.
because actually most estates are very small.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
You know,
Mm.
you'll be amazed at the fact that people actually don't own assets
Mm.
to any considerable extent. I mean, once the creditors and everything is
It's been-
dispensed with, you know.
Share nothing almost.
Mm.
Yeah, you know, one of the biggest cases in succession in South Africa, which did away with the customary male primogeniture principle.
Mm.
A case called Bear versus Magistrate Khayelitsha.
Yeah.
The whole assets that were in there were materials that this couple had gathered to improve their shack in Khayelitsha.
Wow.
That was the whole thing,
Mm.
which the deceased's father took and sold to defray the funeral expenses,
Mm.
and that's where the challenge came from.
Mm.
You know, and in the
Jeez.
other case, which because they were held together is 2 cases. The other case called Shibi, there was only 11,000 rand that was in the estate.
Mm.
So yeah, you've got that. So between as Pogas is just I even called in let's just put it.
Yeah.
That is quite an involved process.
Mm.
Quite an
Mm.
involved process, but there are also expectations of families. You know,
Yeah.
before we went on air, we spoke a little bit about how little people understand the rules of intestate succession,
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
where a person dies without a will. You know,
Mm.
how quite often, it's an example that I use, that if the person dies and he had a spouse, he's got a surviving spouse,
Mm.
I'm smiling because we always assume that it's the husband who died.
Yeah, no, it's always yeah, yeah,
And no children, and they were married in community of property. People often don't understand it because, in the first place, the surviving spouse gets half of the estate. But they don't understand that that one is a consequence of the end of the marriage. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not about succession.
Yes.
And then you start talking about inheritance. And when it comes to inheritance, the spouse and the descendants or children have got this preeminent position. So in this case, if there's only a spouse, the entire estate of the husband goes to the spouse
Wow.
of the deceased husband. And then they don't understand what is going on here, because now you don't even have this whole rigmarole of an executor who's going to do this and distribute this to that one and that one and that one, because there's only a single person qualifying to inherit.
Okay, so which is kind of very, so where there is kind of simple in a way if it's two people only. When there is now these two people and children, so the hierarchy again falls, so the wife will get whatever and then the kids will get the rest.
Look, some of it is almost like common sense. In many instances, it's the spouse who becomes an executor.
Oh, okay.
In many instances.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose it's even pragmatic. They're more likely to know the affairs of
Yeah, sure.
the state of the deceased and be able to move much more quickly.
Yeah.
Although they often have the assistance of a firm of lawyers that
Yeah,
do
sure.
administration of estates, who then help to direct them.
But where there is a case now in instances where there's what we spoke about earlier on, what would be deemed illegitimate children who are not part of this nucleus of the family, what happens there? Talk to us through that.
Okay. Well, as long as there's proof that these are children of the deceased,
Yeah.
then the law treats all children the same. There's no notion of, so children born out of marriage. I'm avoiding the word even illegitimate.
Yeah.
Remember one of my lecturers when I was an undergraduate would say, "You call a child illegitimate as if he jumped in over the fence."
Yeah.
Like he jumped in over the fence and the other children came through.
Yeah.
There's nothing like that. So whether born out of wedlock, natural born children, born within marriage, and even adopted children, all of those are treated the same.
Yeah.
Okay. So what happens is that when the parent dies, each child gets what is called a child share.
Yeah.
Literally, which is you divide whatever is in the kitty with the number of children. So if there's a spouse, the spouse also gets a child share. So if there are 3 children and the spouse, you divide whatever it is there by 4. You get a child share. But with this caveat, the spouse, even though she's entitled to a child share like the children, according to the law, is supposed to get a minimum of 250,000. So if the child share is more than 250,000, then she gets that amount.
Okay.
But if whatever is in the estate is 250,000 or less, then she gets the entire amount, even if they're children.
Okay.
All right.
Even if they're
Interesting.
children. Yes, because that's a minimum that's
Yeah.
prescribed. Just to be 125,000, that's 250,000. So in many, many instances, the spouse ends up getting everything.
Okay.
Either because that's the minimum.
That's all there is.
Yeah, or because there are no children.
Yeah.
If a person dies intestate. So if you really have interest of saying, look, but I also have got a very young brother with siblings that my aging parents cannot take care of, they need to get something or the other, then you need to make sure that you have a will, so that they are also covered. There are a number of things, of course, that are considered, creditors, and also including those who are entitled to maintenance from like these minors that we were talking about.
Sure.
They might not get an inheritance because of the spouses gotten the amount, but they're still entitled to their maintenance from the estate. Because one of the things that a phrase that one learns in their first year in law is that the courts are referred to as the upper guardian of all minors, and also always act in the best interests of the child. So I'm just trying to allay any fears that people would think that, oh, now these children would have nothing. It won't go to that extent where even what is meant for the maintenance of minor children is then dispersed to some heir, and then they're left with nothing.
Wow.
No, it doesn't work like that. So, but I think I think one of the reasons why there might be corruption in the office of the master is exactly the fact that the system is outdated.
Okay.
And because the system is outdated, and number two, it's not coping very well with the demands upon it, it means people get desperate. And people who are desperate are more likely to be to feel the pressure to bribe or to give bribes or to yield to demands for bribes for things to move faster for them. You know, so yeah, it looks like there's real trouble there. The testimonies I've seen, some have said, look, before COVID, it worked fairly well, but they never recovered from whatever happened during the upheaval of the 2-3 years that where COVID was affecting operations.
Wow. Okay, guys, let's take a quick break.
Wow.
We're not going to play a song. It's just going to be some jingles whilst we are going to come back and finish on this particular subject. Welcome back, guys. You are listening to Stay Real with Lester and Spooky, and we have Hector in the studio. We're speaking to the subject, which I think is very important for a lot of people at this particular moment, the subject of the Master of the High Court. And Hector, I mean, your last part there, you were talking about people talking about recovering from that period. I suppose for everyone, that probably was one of the toughest periods. And a lot of money. I'm probably, I haven't made any research, but my assumption would be there's still a lot there that comes from that era. We know in some families, it's quite a lot of family members that died,
at the same time,
that passed on same time, and how much of a nightmare must have been for maybe some of the remnants of those families to even, particularly, families who are related or extended families, in our cases, must be tough for them to actually get access to those estates based on the current sort of narrative that you've just put out there.
Yeah, I think it's part of what brought to the fore the need to digitize the system, because then you can do it from wherever you are.
Yeah.
Yes.
But now with the lockdowns and all that sort of thing, it was very difficult. And then the documents that need to be produced. So, for example, when you're reporting an estate, one of the things for you to be able to appoint an executor, you must have all potential beneficiaries there must be an affidavit that shows that they support. Disappointment. Which none of it is easy, in practical reality. None of it
because
is
I mean, I think look, at some stage we did come across that particular situation, Hector, and like you said earlier on, death really can be problematic for families. Divisions come from that particular moment. So where we had to appoint Unozuko as Endlin as an executor after Kusoleke Umadlamini. So all of us had to make that decision. And also we had to make sure that we appoint someone who's not married, so that for things to go smooth. And Unozuko was the only one who was not married, because Omnyege family we didn't. So those are some of the dynamics that come with that. I suppose. I mean, I don't know, to support your point there.
Yeah, no. I'm just thinking. Just that part before you even talk about the work that the master himself does. One of the areas that's often thorny. I was just looking it up because I was thinking about it here. Having the list of creditors, because remember, one of the reasons why those notices are put in there is so that anyone who's got an interest
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
estate, a creditor, or whatever, can say, "Hey, well, hang on,
See, all up.
they owe us." you know.
Yeah.
And this is why you then have this whole thing about, for instance, if you've got different types of creditors, some are preferred, some have got priority over others. If you've got several mortgages, for example, of course nowadays mostly it's taken care of because they just make sure that there's a cover for the mortgage itself, so that
Yeah,
you
sure.
die, it pays up or something like that. But otherwise, you can have all those things. My point is that there are many things that can delay the actual disbursement of the benefits, as it were. Some of them are disputes about all the potential beneficiaries and whether all of them support who's
that
supposed to
particular
be the
individual.
executor.
Yeah.
And some of them have got to do with, like you're saying, children hitherto unknown emerging at this particular point in time. Of late, you've got people who come up as life partners.
Yeah.
This person was not married, but now there's this issue of a life partner. You know, and so it can become quite convoluted. And of course, some of us simply think in terms of how things are in our culture and think that's how things should just go, without familiarizing ourselves with
the legalities.
But the office of the master, and of course, the other thing that's important for people to think is that the master, yes, there are people who are appointed as master, but it's not an individual. It's an office. It's like the public protector.
Yes.
So you've got all these people who are supposed to help guide this whole process, as it were, so that it happens smoothly and fairly. But yeah, I think of late it's leaving a lot to be desired.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And I mean so you got people there who have been working for a long time who perhaps have and this is where the issue of corruption at some stage ahead might be coming in, who knows by kudala le lapha le.
Mhlawumbe 15 years, for example.
Yeah, I did. And gradually people take from those funds.
Transact.
Yeah, transact. Okanye have a particular lawyer or people, because, and this is the thing about crime, is that there has to be some lawyers for some reason or the other that are involved in making sure.
Lawyers are infamous for being used for money laundering.
Yeah.
There was a case actually, I think, at the master's office in Maritzburg. Several millions. Can't remember now.
Yeah.
17 million or something like that. But they seem to be catching up with. Initially, they thought they just started digitizing, so they thought maybe the system had been hacked. And they realized that it hadn't been hacked. Then they realized that there were many steps in terms of the sort of standard operating procedures that had not been followed. Then they started catching up with some of the. So they were saying they might be making arrests soon, but. The thing is, because of the theft, they had been unable to make some payouts and needed to do so, because now you've got all these people who really need this money, who can't get it because it's inaccessible.
Yeah,
So yeah, there is that too.
Yeah, and it's quite a lot of money. So I think I think shouldn't we end it there, Hector? Was there any other thing that you want to add on to this subject?
Well, I think related to this is just that I think people just need to be a lot more diligent.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why these things become so complex is that I was just thinking about my context. For example, my father died 20 years ago. The house was registered in his name.
Yes.
It was never changed from his name.
Yeah.
Because people just carry on living.
Yeah.
And the other day my brother was saying, my mother was saying fix this thing while I'm still alive, because if I am also gone and your father is gone, this might become a headache for you.
Mm.
Yeah.
And people have got things like that, farms and so on. Their father
Yes.
dies, then they carry on farming, and so until
Yes.
3 generations later, you've got this kid who doesn't interested in farming, wants to sell. Then the deeds register says,
That's what we
you
are
need- you
having
need
in our
this, and
family
you
too.
need all of this to happen first.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
So
Yeah, because we've got the same issue, Nati, back in the family farm, whereby the name is still under my grandfather.
Mm.
somebody who died in 1964.
Not even 1964, in 1910, 1908 type of thing.
Wow,
Yes.
Wow.
See that?
So now
yeah.
basically we are all like family. Like I'm your sister, you're my brothers. And then you have kids, and then I have kids, and I have kids. So it was never then
Moved
over
over
to their
to-
kids to say,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
if firstborn ka Hector is the one that's gonna be, yeah,
Mm.
and then go her children will be, and so forth and so
yeah.
forth. So
Wow.
that's the quagmire that we're sitting.
And by the way, the
in
other
now.
money is that the master takes care of. I'm going to mention this because it's a bit of a stick in the works. You are allowed to bequeath property to heirs in successive substitution to maybe the 3rd generation. So, in other words, say to my son, and after him to his eldest son.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't have a son, it must go to so and so,
Mm.
so and so. You're allowed to do that.
Yeah.
Oh.
Which means, therefore, even though my son becomes an owner, but he's got an owner without the right to dispose of the asset.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
already been-
yeah.
It's
yeah.
already been
It's
bequeathed to
already
someone
been-
else.
yeah,
in the
Mm,
future.
After
Okay.
him.
Wow, that's quite a nice.
It is actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it
eliminates
it
certain-
really puts some rules and some
So,
Yes.
so if
grounds.
you've got an asset like a family farm you want to keep in the family,
Yes.
Yeah.
you can make that kind of arrangement.
Up to the 3rd
It's
generation.
called a fideicommisum.
Oh.
Latin lessons 101.
That arrangement.
yeah.
So you
I
can
think
do
I like that.
You can do
Yeah.
successive substitution. You
Yes.
can also do alternate substitution. So
Yeah.
I leave it to my son. If he
Mm.
doesn't take it, it must go to this one.
Yeah.
Not even after him.
Yeah,
But
Yes.
if it's not there, or if he dies before me, or whatever, this is what must happen.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can also,
Wow.
can also do that.
But I mean, that one is also quite nice because it's in a form of a will as well. That is being stated thoroughly on paper, which I think part of this debate, guys, of this discussion was to also encourage people to actually do wills.
Yes.
In order for you don't get this type of a situation that Spock is in. And I know that also in our family we have that type of a situation. The Matubela land, Kausia Alice. Yeah, I mean we've got 17 hectares there. But the thing is, we still have a title deed. Also in Etanga.
In whose name?
It's in the name of the grandfather. You know?
Same
So,
situation.
yeah, and you have the same setup here in Etanga also. We have a title deed that is in I think in my grandfather's sort of name as well. So you then never had, and that's one of the things I think our generation, we need to correct those things,
Yes.
because I found that there's quite a lot of those situations where there had not been no continuation in terms of even the history itself.
Yes.
Abazali bethu nathi, how we found out about Londo Lomhlaba esinayo as families, it was never properly discussed. You know, to say bantwana bam ninomhlaba ongayo. I mean, as a result, but there are families who live there. We can't go and claim la mhlaba because 17 hectares figure susaba bantu kulala ba
And incidentally, you might actually find that land is now theirs.
yeah,
Because it's
through,
been
through,
unclaimed.
through prescription.
Yeah.
yeah, you know,
30 years uninterrupted, openly, etc. Can actually become
You know,
owners.
so it's
ownership.
really, yeah. But someone there, Palileo, Keith Ngesere, very informative. Team stay real. So thank you, Hector, for that. I think we hope a lot of people are actually learning from this.
Yeah.
And guys, we're going to have this feature. We call it a legal matters sort of feature, where
Yeah.
we'll discuss certain sort of topics that we think. But this one, I think I like the idea of continuing with someone who actually works in that space.
Yes.
That can actually open up the picture
Exactly, yeah.
quite clearly of some of the examples, live examples.
Yeah,
that you
what
might be
happens in
facing.
these
Yeah,
offices,
yeah,
and
yeah,
dynamics and that
yeah.
sort of thing.
I think that's what
Yeah.
we'll do, guys.
It'll be
We'll
very good.
continue with that. We'll try and find Hector Sautumawena kuzame ukhangela.
No, I can get you one.
Yeah,
easily. Easily.
So, guys, we
Just
are
tell
coming
me.
to the time now is 4:48. So we'll do
Yes.
one song, and then thereafter we'll end the show, as it were. So I'm looking 4:48. Icon in the shy.
Ah, Yuko.
Yeah,
Mm.
Hector, thank you, man, for this.
Yes.
You know, it's